Hello, everyone, and welcome to the presentation. Today, I'll try to briefly tell you what we do at Peak Games, the team, and myself a little bit, then proceed to how we actually do creative optimization in mobile user acquisition in different platforms and different ad units. And we'll hopefully show you some real-life examples with numbers that we've seen from our own campaigns. And we'll end up with Q&A. So, Peak Games was founded 5 years ago. We're based in Istanbul with, with more than 100 people at the moment. We're doing basically in two genres. We're doing games, one being casual puzzle games, the other being board and card games. We now have two target markets, US and Turkey, and we have two top grossing titles in US market in top 100, and three top grossing titles in Turkey in top 20. So, of course, we were active in pretty much every country. Up until now, we have more than 300 million installs. And these are some of the flagship titles we have. Toy Blast, Spades Plus, 101, OK. So, why am I here? Because we've grown all these games with user acquisition. And these are not viral hits. We do user acquisition regularly in US and Turkey and in many other countries. And we're a team of 15 people that has been doing this for a couple of years now. And as you can see, myself, I'm not coming from a marketing background. I've been working at Peak Games for the last 3.5 years with an engineering background. So my team's approach are a little bit out of marketing way of looking into things. So the reason that creative optimization is so important lies within the concept of user acquisition. Right now in mobile, we have more advertisers than publishers. So that creates a whole ecosystem where we need to maximize eCPMs of publishers, because this is pretty much the only thing a publisher can control. A publisher can control the number of impressions he serves, and eventually what the system works is based on maximizing the CPM revenues from ad revenues, yeah? And this is a very short funnel. You create an ad impression, what we call a CPM is cost per mil, 1,000 impressions, and then it's turned into an ad click, what we call a CPC, and then to an install, what we will call to a CPI. A lot of advertisers pay on CPI, whereas most of the publishers look for CPMs to evaluate their own ad performance. So this is a table that I will just briefly explain you how the whole thing works. As you can see, there are 3 different advertisers in here. They're willing to pay different prices for one install. As you can see, advertiser C is an aggressive one that is willing to pay $10, whereas advertiser A is for $3, and for advertiser B, it's $2. Let's say they all have 1,000 impressions, and let's say they have different CTRs and CVRs. Advertiser B, as you can see, is outperforming CTR in CTR and CVR, the other advertisers. And eventually, she would get 50 installs for the same amount of impressions when compared to the other ones, advertiser C having only 5 and advertiser A having only 15. The reason that I'm showing you is advertiser B, although she's willing to pay less to an install, can make the publisher of this ad earn a lot more than the other ones. $100 for the same amount of impressions. So this auction is a typical way of an ad impression auction that's happening at the moment. So in this one, advertiser B wins the auction, and advertiser C can only outbid the advertiser B by paying more to the same install. So why did I show you this? Because better CTRs and CVRs lead to higher CPMs. And higher CPMs means that you can get higher scale for the same price, or cheaper installs with the same scale, yeah? One interesting thing about having higher eCPMs, specifically in rewarded videos, like Ad Colony, Wangle, Amplifier, Unity ads, and so, is that you become the first ad to serve, which has a higher CTR and CVR on itself. And this creates a self-fulfilling loop. If you're the first ad to be served in that network, then you tend to have higher CTRs and CVRs. Ask your account managers that the CTR and CVR rates will tend to decrease with the number of impressions that you're served in the ranking. One other interesting thing about the high CPMs is you will get access to a higher quality inventory. This is mostly valid for Facebook and adverts. As long as you have higher CTRs and CVRs, then you tap into higher eCPM inventory, which eventually, the reason that they are higher eCPM is they're targeted more by more advertisers. So they tend to pay more, they tend to play more, they tend to engage more with your app. These are like two actions that we took in time. So you can see that this is an AdWords campaign, an actual AdWords campaign. In the first circle, we've just changed the creative and increased the CTR. That will increase the conversion rates with the same amount we pay for the same install. And the second push was just changing another creative that further increased the scale, decreasing the price of the install. So how does the whole process work for us? We start from understanding the users. I know you guys probably have a lot of experience on this as well, but I'll try to give you some alternative ways of understanding users. We make research on every game of ours, and we do make research on our competitors. There are tools that you can literally check your competitors' visuals in different ad networks and their performances as well, because it's a fairly easy calculation that's tools can do it. What are the things that we do is to make researches, that we go to Facebook Audience Insights, we go to Google Trends, we go to Twitter hashtags, Instagram pages, the competitors, different social media activities, and kind of creepy, I know, but you can literally go and try to understand who your actual users are. And eventually, this process leads to creating a typical player. That is, let's say, 35 plus female, that is from US, that is conservative, that likes bingo, slots, or casual games, that's from Illinois, Texas, whatever. Once you have this prototype player, then we start creating different ad patterns. Let's say you don't have any ideas on what to show to your users. You start from the very beginning, trying very different concepts from each other. Don't start with similar creatives, because it will not lead you anywhere. Start from very different patterns of things, like in-game play, like your real-life videos, real-life images, like animations, like cartoonish stuff. And then you will have some winners, and then you'll further iterate them with smaller iteration cycles, with smaller changes in each iteration. And eventually, you will have winners. And these winners will lead your campaign to a great extent, yeah? Some ground rules to make sure that you have is don't exceed a certain percentage of the overall budget to testing, because for obvious reasons. And make sure that you have enough number of installs that are run at the same time with the same conditions in each and every image test campaign. So, one number, this number is from Toy Blast campaign that we've been running for the last couple of months. The number of installs and the number of clicks are very significant, that you can just understand the difference. So the idea here is these are like 7 different images and animated GIFs, and their CPI rates, as you can see, is quite different from each other. You can get an install for $2, you can get an install for 70 cents. And this, the $2 install, is a very good performing one, I want to remind you. So what we look usually is not CTR or is not CVR only. We first looked at CTR times CVR, which what we call as result rate, which is a very good understanding of an impression to an install rate. But then we've also seen that the user quality is also affected by the images itself. So we added the second thing, what we call a CPE, that is calculated from percentage of active users. So eventually you can see that the good performing image can outperform by 4 times an average performing image. One thing to keep in mind is if you have a lot of good images, it's always better to find an exceptional image that just outperforms the good images, because that exceptional image will spend your 50–60% of your budget. And there might be an inverse correlation between CTR and CVR if you are pushing your CTR in an unnatural way, tricking your users. And this will result in a lower CVR or a lower quality of users. And make sure that you know the second and the third best performing images, because there will be a time will come where you will need them. The ad fatigue is what we call, is after a couple of days your ad creatives will just die out. And make sure you check the significance, statistical significance as well, because sometimes things just happen randomly. We do A/B testing with Chartboost, Facebook, AdWords, Unity Ads. They all have this structure that you can easily run A/B tests. So I'll go on with the cases. This is one real case that we have in a recent card game of ours in Gin Rummy. We were optimizing towards CPI in this case, and we did a bad thing, because when you look at the CPI rates, all these 3 images perform really well. Although this is a card game that people compete against each other. We knew that our players liked Bingo, we knew that our players liked casual games and slot games, so we put all the images. They are looking fancy with colorful and stuff. Their CTRs and CVRs were way better than our images, but eventually our CPI rates, even though our CPI rates were low, our CPEs were super high. So once you have a winning image, how do you just play with this image to make it better working? So what we do is we sit together with the team. We decompose the image into different elements of what we think is working well in this image. And then we try iterations for each of them. What we do is like we take call to action, we take button, we take the contrast between foreground and background. We take the items, Rubik Cube, and start iterating them. And eventually, you'll get 5%, 10% marginal increases in each and every visual that you have. And then do the tests again. It's a never-ending process, so you should never stop doing it. So these are some examples from Toy Blast. The first one has the same problem with the thing that I've shown. And the second one is a very high CTR, a high CVR ad. We loved it when we first saw it. And we said, yeah, this is going to work. And it failed. It failed bad way. Because the reason for that is we liked it, but we were not the target audience. So in a team, we have this saying, if we like the image, it's probably not going to work. Because we're not them, eventually, right? So, and the third one is a very simple one. It's just a gameplay screen, but it works really well. So this one was an image that we've put in a store. It has a very high CVR because it's directly from the game itself. So we thought we might increase its CTRs. And then we did this iteration. We just increased the contrast between the foreground and the background, and it has increased the CTRs. We did another cycle. We just circled it around with a red line, and it has a further increased CTR. And it usually is very controllable. It's not a mysterious process most of the time if you start learning what your users like. So this is the cultural part of different creatives. As you can see, these two images are from an old mid-core game we had in the past. The image on the right, if you go to Turkey and ask anyone where this guy's from in the past, and people would probably say this is an old Turkish warrior. This looks very familiar to a lot of people in Turkey. And that's how it ended up working really good in Turkey, but not working anywhere else. The one on the left, on the other hand, didn't work in Turkey at all because we don't have Vikings, we don't have griffins, we don't even have them in the mythology. So it didn't work out well in those geographies. And these are some other examples. You can see different countries tend to react differently to different images. And there are absolute winners and losers, of course, but eventually some images will work better in some countries and some other will work not that good. So this is another thing that you might consider doing. Different times of the year, different times of the season tend to have different expectations in terms of user behavior, right? If you're in Easter, last week, for example, was Chinese New Year, right? You could do something for your Chinese users to adapt, to modify your existing creatives to them, right? And we do the same thing for Easter, for Halloween, even for Independence Day. It's just for one day, but people love these kind of things, and they react to it. To wrap up, we tend to have, for Toy Blast, we've been pushing the game for the last 6 months. We now have more than 1,000 creatives and probably more than 40 videos. So this is important because as long as you do it well, you just outbid your competitors in a different dimension. Not with your price, not with your bid, but with your creatives. If you have interstitials, banners, and videos that are just working in different channels, make sure you test them as well, because banners tend to behave differently than interstitials, and they tend to behave differently than your native ads. It is a very strong sign if you have your CTRs dropping in your campaign, you have to act. And usually the first reaction you will have is to play with the creatives. Of course, in a creative testing campaign, the prices will be higher than an optimal campaign because you let the whole thing run, knowing that some images are performing worse than the other ones. So you tend to keep them as they are until you're sure that your tests are significant. If you're advertising your game in emerging markets, make sure you're not uploading images of 5 megabytes, 10 megabytes, because it's not going to reload. It's not going to load onto the device unless your ad network is doing something there. And for the final note, for video testing, it's a tough concept, I know. Try testing different concepts first, not just very small differences inside the video, but just do some different concepts at first. And then make sure you're playing with the thumbnail image, which is one of the really significant parts of the video inventory. And of course, like, you can modularize, like you can just segment and divide the video into different segments to just switch and change them. I'll wrap up. The creative optimization is important because it brings greater scale with lower prices, and it needs a systematic approach. It needs, you have to put some effort in it. And if you're doing it good, there will be more failures than your successes. It's almost an ironic thing, because your best winning creative is your best winning creative for a reason. And make sure you remember that the ad creatives are contextual, they are cultural, and they are usually a composition of different parts and different images itself. So it's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
How big is your team?
The team is 15 people, but the marketing art team is 2 people right now, dedicated to creating marketing art. We, at the ad operations, we're 6 people. And we have some analytics people and some big data people that are helping with the development of marketing needs, technical development.
Hey, specifically to Facebook, have you found it easier to A/B test by putting different creatives within an ad set or separating the budget for the ad sets? Like if you put it within the ad set, then Facebook tells you the winner by diverting the budget to it.
Just a couple of
what
months
have you
ago,
found better?
Yeah, there's this new feature coming in that's called split testing. And this is perfectly tailored for this specific need. So you can just test different creatives. And it will be launched very soon, I assume. But before that, we were not letting Facebook to decide which ad is working better, because Facebook was deciding it's way early, like within like, a couple of thousand impressions, which is kind of dangerous as well, because most of the time, it's not that, if you run the test again, if you run the campaign again, there might be some other creatives that are winning in the Facebook campaign. So that's why we tend to kind of compete them within each other with different ad sets, one ad set per ad, that sort of thing. But this is usually not advised because it's for sure decreasing the campaign performance. That's why I told like if you want to test your creative, then you kind of have a suboptimal money spending in there.
What system are you using to manage all these tests?
Manage all what?
Well, all the impressions that all the campaigns you're running,
yes.
And you're not only running it on Facebook, you're running on
sure.
different. Are you using one system to do this, or are you building your own system, or are you doing it directly in?
So for analytics and for tracking purposes, we were using Upsite in the past, but I think 2.5 years ago, we switched to our own in-house data warehouse and reporting dashboard systems. Now we're running all the things in-house. We're creating our own dashboards and visualization stuff. We gather all the spent data through an aggregator called Singular. I don't know if you know it. That just adds up different spending from different ad networks. And for the visual side, competitor visuals, there are tools like AppScotch, WhatTransfer, and stuff like that.
Do you optimize your App Store creatives by geos? Do you localize them? Aside from localizing them, do you do anything different with your App Store creatives to increase the click-to-download rates by different geographies?
Yeah, the App Store part, we're starting to do it. For the ad creatives, we definitely do it.
Okay, cool.
But by the way, the localization, we do it for all. I was mentioning culturalization type of thing. Yeah.
In terms of the statistical significance you were mentioning, are you looking at number of installs or impressions, and what is like the minimum, say, number of installs that is significant?
It depends on the amount of difference between 2 variants. Usually what we look is if you're looking for CTR significance, you look impression to clicks. So I think a chi-square test in there would just do fine from an impression to click when you compare different variants. But if you're looking for significance in difference between CTR times CVR, then we look from impression to install. And usually what we've seen is like 20 to 30 installs per an image is more than enough to understand the performance.
Okay, thanks.
I've one last question myself. What was the most amazing result you achieved, and what caused it? Can you remember something like that?
So our largest, like our best performing video was seen by 100 million people.
Wow.
And it carried probably more than half of the overall campaign budget.
And what caused it that so many people watched it? What did the trick? What was it?
What was the trick?
Yeah.
I think it was a combination of luck and what we've seen in the past experiments. We've used an item within the video that people loved. Eventually, we've learned that is the reason that chapter of the game was very successful. Like we've connected the dots after realizing it's working well.
Well, thank you very much, and maybe one round of applause again for